Welcome to the Sounding Board podcast, the podcast about freedom, capitalism, and latterly lockdown lunacy.
Yep. And actually, we're back in my house.
This is the first. Give me a hug. Give me a hug. This is the first time we've been back.
You've been in my house. I mean, let's be clear about that. But we haven't actually done a recording here for months.
No, we did one in my house last week, but that was the first indoor one, I think, for a while, where we weren't.
Yeah.
You know, in different houses using Zencaster and
yeah,
doing it online.
Obviously, that can be handier, can't it? There are moments where it's just like, should we just quickly connect up and do that?
Yeah, and obviously we had the outdoor ones where we were kind of riding on our bikes and popping down for meadows. But this is the first proper kind of podcast where we're sitting in our normal chairs.
Our chairs.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant.
I've made you a cup of tea.
Thank you.
And we're ready to go.
So this is, I want this to be another lockdown podcast, but not in the normal way. So I want us to tackle something that I don't think many people have tackled.
Okay, good.
And you can, I want to talk about modelling, not catwalk modelling. Before you say it, nice blue steel there.
Yeah.
What
you're talking Ferguson style
agent-based modelling.
You're doing data modelling.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Specifically agent-based modelling, where you've got these little...
Define agent-based modelling.
So you've got these little agents.
Secret agents.
Imagine like a computer game, like a Syndicate or that's probably two.
You're doing this for our audience, okay? I know you're talking to me.
Okay, World of Warcraft, where you've got all these like little NPCs and they go wandering around.
NPCs?
Non-player characters.
You've got to assume people don't get this stuff.
So you've got this computer model where they've got lots of these little agents, these little characters who go around doing their business, and you can program them to do different things.
They abide their lives by a series of programmed rules.
Yeah, and this modelling was used, it's been used for a bunch of different things in the past. There was a guy called, I think it's Robert Glass, who was working for an American company who did kind of defence contracts and stuff, and he was working on modelling to do with like keeping water clean and that kind of thing. I want to talk about him and his family, because this is all about the origins of agent-based modelling for pandemics.
Right, so you're doing a modelling origin story, and the specifics here, because I think people would understand, if people have heard the term model or computer model. I mean, you can do a model in Excel of something. Even just taking a very basic series of data or a couple of series of data, you can create a model, and that you can use to predict what's going to happen next for something. And a computer model takes that a step further, because it normally would involve a more complex algorithm rather than just a series of formula. There would be a level of iteration, for example. But what you're talking about is a step further than that, where you literally program like individual entities to interact based on a series of variables. Yeah, and that's what you mean by agent-based modelling.
Yeah, you program these little agents, and they can be children, they can be adults, and they can be in different jobs. And depending on what they do, they'll interact in different ways, and they'll spend different amounts of time in different places. And you can model behaviours, and you can.
It's behaviour modelling of a populace in this case.
Yeah, and it was it was used for a number of things in the past, but I don't know whether you want to get any scotch ready for this.
Oh God!
Because to be honest, I'm not sure whether this is going to make you laugh or cry.
I'll stick to my tea for now, and we'll see.
But the origins of using this for kind of disease control come from a 14-year-old school project.
You see, I have heard
back in 2006, I think.
Which is not even that long ago.
No, but it was Laura Glass, the daughter of this other Robert Glass.
Wasn't it like a high school project or something?
It was a high school project. So she was entering into this science fair, and she, her dad was kind of doing this modelling, and she thought, well, hang on, why don't I kind of take my dad's modelling and kind of use it in a different way? What about if there was like an infectious disease that hit a small town? Why don't we do some modelling there? And her idea was that kids transmit everything. Therefore, you shut the schools and you stop the spread of disease. So they kind of created this model in a small town of 10,000 people, and they worked out that if you left everyone alone, then 5,000 people would be infected with this infectious disease after like a month or whatever. But if you shut all the schools, only 500 people would get infected.
That sounds familiar.
And this is her model, and she entered it into the science fair, and she came third. But even before,
She didn't even win it.
but even
This isn't even a winning model.
even before then, her dad was working in Sandia, I think.
What was his original model for? She's decided to do this for infectious disease. Or...
Yeah, his was something about like water cleanliness, I think, and kind of infecting streams and rivers and that kind of thing. Because you can use these models for all sorts of different things.
Of course.
But they were getting.
So his were probably more pollution.
Yes.
Right.
So his company was contacted by, I think, it must have been the Bush administration at the time.
Yeah.
They were worried about chemical warfare and kind of infectious diseases being kind of flooded among the population. And they were kind of asked about have you ever looked at kind of modelling with this kind of thing? And he's like, oh, my daughter and I are writing a paper on this. This is even before she won the competition. My daughter and I are writing a paper on this. Have a look at this. Have a look at these models. And they kind of finished the paper. What they did was I think for the previous 50 years, they kind of used these models on previous pandemics, and said, if you'd had lockdown then so few people would have
Oh
done
my
this.
god! So literally all they did was take the numbers of what had actually happened,
and they said,
and retrospectively said,
if you'd had a lockdown
It'd have been
early
a
on, it'd have been a tenth of blah 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 blah. And for 50 years, they sort of said, look at all the people who've died because we haven't been shutting down schools and all that kind of thing. And even, it wasn't as bad in the Bush administration. Like, so they were talking about shutting down schools, but it was like seen as like a last resort. And it wasn't anywhere near the kind of the lockdown that we've had the world over. But it's a young girls' school project. That's the reason for that everyone's locking everything. It's completely untested. Epidemiologists at the time were saying this is ridiculous. What you need to do is you need to treat people who get the disease. You need to protect the vulnerable. You need to let everybody else kind of interact to get herd immunity until there's a vaccine. And that's how you build your own immune system, is by kind of interacting with people, and you don't shut down the economy, etc., etc., etc. So there were lots of people against it at the time, but it was just kind of in the background. They had a plan apparently for H1N1.
Yes.
But they obviously never needed it.
Which is Spanish flu.
H1N1.
Yeah.
I thought that was the bird flu. Well, no, there was H5N1.
There you go, see. The H1N1 is Spanish flu.
Right.
And that did rear itself up 10 plus years ago. Yeah.
Right. Whichever one it was.
Yeah.
I think I've got the numbers right.
Yeah.
So they had a plan for that, but obviously they didn't need it, and it was kind of shelved and then kind of brought out again for coronavirus. It's just
and
awful.
From your research, do you know if Neil Ferguson based his modelling on that? Is that
on the principles?
Right.
On the principles. So it was originally shutting down the school, and they were asking questions like, "Well, can kids learn at home?" Yes. Oh, therefore we will shut all schools. And then
so simple.
And then it was that's literally what it was. And people were saying there was, people were saying, it's like a eureka moment. We've kind of discovered this new way to treat infectious diseases, and they started just kind of extrapolating and expanding it out. Okay, what about, can people work from home? Yeah, of course people can work from home. Right. Okay, shut down businesses as well, and make force people to stay inside. The more we do these authoritarian kind of lockdowns and quarantines, the more we will save lives. Without thinking, and something I've missed are the economic models around what happens when you shut down an economy, and
Well, what economic models when you shut down an economy?
Exactly.
Find me one. Yeah.
They just don't exist. All they're doing, this is like kind of Hazlitt's number one lesson. They're just focusing on one thing, and not looking at the bigger picture and thinking, okay, the economy shuts down, we can no longer pay for healthcare. How many more people are going to die, or what's going to happen when people are shut inside their houses and they're going stir crazy and.
Well, where do you start?
And all these, the agents and the models, it can't be stressed enough how basic these models are.
They must be, yeah.
Just operating on kind of binary choices all the time, and the crazy thing is that the models that they're using, they treat school children as being, these like kind of hundreds of little kind of typhoid Marys running around all the time. When all the evidence suggests with coronavirus that they don't transmit it at all. There's no evidence that a single child has transmitted it to a single adult. There's no evidence at all.
I think it was something like 47 studies show that.
Yes,
it's crazy amounts.
Yes.
As I say, where do you start? Where do you start with that? I suppose
I almost thought it was a joke because I kind of heard about it and then I did a bit of research, and it's quite hard to find research. Nobody's really touching this. I've managed to find a couple of kind of articles where people have kind of have looked into it and looked into the history, but it's not easy to come by. And people should be, particularly on like lockdown skeptics and stuff, people should be kind of shouting about this stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the model is bad is the general perceived wisdom amongst the lockdown skeptic, but I do think going into the fundamental foundations of it and why is important. I think there's obviously an anti-state angle that we can take here very easily, and it's why did people in these positions of authority just blink and go, yes, that makes perfect sense. To say that you've proved that you would have saved lives in the past had only you done this is crazy. If that's how they bought into it, based on a series of assumptions that are unproven. They're still unproven right now, even though we've gone through this. In fact, they're disproven.
I was going to say, I don't think unproven is strong enough. They've been disproved.
They've been disproved. And the fundamental part of any computer model is that you should be able to go back, put real data in, and have it get to the same point you're at now. And this is what I've been saying all along about the Ferguson model with regards to all of the countries, let alone just the UK or Sweden or whatever, that have run this model, is halfway through, you should be able to put the same data in and go, so does it still work? Or you should at least be able to create a feedback mechanism that makes the model better during the course of its use. None of that has happened. If you look at the graph of Sweden, and again, it's doing the rounds now because it's basically over. The graph is 100 times higher for the do nothing approach, let alone it's about 50 times higher for the do a few things approach. The line's barely visible at all for what has actually happened, which is closer to the do something in this.
Well, I think the number of deaths without lockdown was fewer than predicted with a lockdown, wasn't it? By some margin.
It's been daft. And the other thing is the timescale over it. We're supposed to be like right in the middle of this massive peak right now, and it's all over. It's all over back.
But and they've been people like Ferguson have been modelling for years badly.
Yeah.
And it doesn't appear that he's ever looked. He doesn't appear that he's ever looked at the existing things he's modelled and thought, right, I didn't get this wrong. I didn't get this right.
Here's how to improve it.
How can I make changes?
Feedback. But the people in charge have just taken it hook, line, and sinker.
But you're talking about doing that now. I mean, it should have been done in all the other
That's
scales.
What I'm saying. Back then, Bush administration or whoever else, and anyone since who's ever looked at this, how are there even senior scientists? But again, is it because they are senior scientists in the administration? We have a chief medical officer and a chief scientific officer and all this kind of stuff. Is the only reason they're there politics, even though they swear blind they don't want anything to do with politics? Like a civil servant says, no, I'm just here, I'm just doing my duty. How are they not using basic scientific principles, let alone a bit of common sense, to say if you're going to produce a policy that is so radical, so sweeping in what it's going to do, and you're just going to say it just works, trust me, it works. But it's the things that it enacts are so draconian, so damaging, potentially damaging. That anyone can see that, can't they?
But it's a bit like socialism in that it appears to work without much thought. If you don't think about it too much, you've got what if everybody points in the same direction and works towards a common goal?
You're right.
That will work. And it's the same thing. Well, if people just stay away from each other, they're not going to infect anyone. Therefore,
so we'll just tell people to stay away from each other.
We're going to force people to stay away from each other. It's as basic as that.
Yes.
But you could prove that.
But this is state people again because of those beliefs. Just took it as of course it's possible.
But why isn't? So what I want to know is why isn't Neil Ferguson and his cronies? Why aren't they getting scrutinised? And after a couple of weeks, when he had his models, and he said, right, okay, we think there are going to be 250,000 deaths or whatever. You don't do anything. Okay, now we've done the lockdown. What does the lockdown show? What does your model show that the lockdown is going to do? Oh, actually, it showed this. Well, that's completely wrong. So go away and make changes to your model.
Yeah.
And then we'll rerun it again, and then we'll try the next 2 weeks. And after that, we can prove that you actually don't know what you're doing at all.
Yeah.
Because you can't predict anything. After how many iterations do you need to do? How many weekly or 2 weekly iterations do you need to do before you say, actually,
it was so wrong?
Not only has your model been wrong every single time, but all the changes you've made have not made it any more accurate either.
Yes. But what have we done? We've run the same model again for the winter. And now the headlines are 200,000 will die if we don't lock down in the winter. And it's just nonsense. But they've got the media on their side. They've obviously got the whole of government on their side. They've got the whole of the opposition on their side. There is no opposition to this other than a tiny, tiny minority. So we're screwed. Once again, we're screwed. This is black pill territory again, and you're not making me feel any better.
I told you you're going to need a scotch.
Completely, and this is the state is bad. I must admit, I like your link with socialism, and it's not that we're always trying to link things with socialism, but the concept of people will want to do this, or people will do as they're told, or all of that.
It's the concept that
I love that.
If there's a myth, and again I don't think this is.
But it's the planned economy. That's what it is.
But the myth is that if people voluntarily doing one thing is good, then the next best thing is to force them to do it. That's forcing people to do what would be good voluntarily is better than letting people do whatever they want voluntarily. That's the myth.
Yeah, because the danger is that they might not all do it,
and that needs to be absolutely dispelled. And that's never worked.
But it is. I mean, I used to say that the closest thing that we've ever seen to a planned economy is the health service, and look how bad that is. But we obviously have had the closest thing to a planned economy, a closer thing to a planned economy right now, which is the shutting down of about 90% of the economy.
Yeah. So you've been calling this the Great Depression, the Great Suppression.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's out the window now. You've been trumped, I'm afraid.
Oh, tell me.
Plandemic.
Plandemic?
Yeah.
That's been around for ages.
I've only just heard that. That's
brilliant.
You're
joking,
no,
really?
That's brilliant. That describes it perfectly.
Yeah, that's been around since the word go. I've not used it because it sounds too conspiratorial for me.
No, I think that's perfect because that's what's killing. That's what's killing everybody at the moment.
But plandemic is
too many plans. It's getting everywhere. Everything's being planned. The economy's being planned. Schools being planned.
I see. I read plandemic as this has been planned.
No. As in planned economy. That's what I've heard it used.
Right. Okay. I'm not sure that was right at the beginning, when it's when deaths are on the rise or whatever. Plandemic, I heard as a conspiracy theory.
No, I've just heard it. People talking about the dangers of the planned economy, and we're suffering from the effects of a pandemic.
Okay. I like that
kind of play on words.
Yeah. Well,
we can still call it.
There's all sorts of. There's been a lot of those.
That's a little bit cringeworthy.
But you see, the Great Suppression is about the suppression of the people and the businesses. I mean, that's what it is. Let alone
it doesn't rhyme with pandemic though.
Whatever. It rhymes with Great Depression, Andy. If I had to explain that to
you.
I know. But it's. I'm not sure it ever actually qualified as a pandemic. Did it?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Like, it's not. I don't know how many countries it needs to be a pandemic.
It's not anymore, but it was.
It was an epidemic, but even then, the definition of epidemic and the number of infections has got to be pretty high.
They're not as high as you would think.
Mm.
So epidemics and pandemics, you would think would have to affect like the majority of people or whatever.
Well, so right now it's not an epidemic, okay? The levels we're at is not an epidemic yet.
The
there
levels,
are draconian measures in place.
The levels for all these things, the level for getting to a pandemic is far. I can't remember off the top
it's
of my
like
head
1% or something, isn't it? Yeah.
But it's far lower than you would ever imagine. So the bar isn't high for reaching a pandemic.
Yeah.
That's not some
Yeah.
life-threatening
But
thing
the point
for everybody.
is, we are below the level of pan or epidemic.
I didn't realise we were below epidemic.
Oh, completely.
I knew we were below pandemic.
Completely. And so because epidemic is just about this country, just about this area.
Yeah.
So we're below epidemic. We've been below epidemic for some time, and so the mask wearing has started after. While we are not at epidemic stage, and so the concept of preventing an epidemic, it's like this is a difficult one, isn't it? Because it's like, of course, are you against preventing epidemics? But again, you look at what has always been done in the past, and that is you treat the sick, you protect the vulnerable, all the things you said earlier. You don't live in a perpetual state of preventing an epidemic. Is that the right way of putting it? It's, obviously we could all be doing things that would seem to prevent it. Staying in our houses.
We could all live like Howard Hughes, couldn't we?
Yes, that's what I'm getting at. That's what I'm getting at. But a lot of the measures they talk about anyway are actually bad for you. Staying away from other people, as you said, the epidemiologists who were originally saying this isn't a good model, a good methodology, are right in saying that your immune system needs to deal with pathogens, otherwise it won't get very good. And so we need to be close to each other. We need to be picking up bugs and dealing with them,
picking up other coronaviruses. And that kind of thing, there's evidence to suggest that if you've had, some of the strains of the common cold, that will provide immunity for the current coronavirus. Yep. But if you stay in your little kind of hermetically sealed box, you're not going to get any of that, and your immune system's going to be rubbish.
Yeah. So the long-term effect is that actually you're more likely to have a horrible strain of something.
Well, okay, so it's like peanut allergies. So schools now, schools in the past would ban peanuts if a child in the classroom had a peanut allergy. Okay, fair. I can understand that. I can understand that. I still don't think it's ideal.
It's just a blanket ban.
But now they're a blanket ban on peanuts in case somebody picks up a peanut allergy. Since these bans have been in place,
allergies like this,
more people have been picking up peanut allergies because they're not exposed to peanuts.
Yeah, well, and it's fearful parents. This is that safetyism culture. Fearful parents who won't give their children peanuts or anything with peanuts in early in their life for fear that they were born with a peanut allergy, and what it does is have them develop a peanut allergy by them not giving it. I remember early on giving our kids like peanut butter and stuff like that. Before you give them a peanut they can choke on, giving them stuff with peanuts in, and knowing this and going, these kids are not having this. They're certainly not picked it up from us. None of us are allergic. And I'm gonna. Well, I remember the first time I was like, we're giving them this stuff. Just let's just be on standby for the next 10 minutes. But we're talking, under one.
Yeah.
And it's like peanuts. Fine. There we go. Move on. That's it. Now peanuts are in their life. That's it.
I remember throwing peanuts up in the air and catching them in my mouth when I was like a little lad.
Yeah.
And getting told off for it because because my gullet wasn't big enough.
Yeah. That's fair.
But they were the only peanut warnings that I ever had. I still did it. But,
yeah. It's crazy. The modelling thing is. I mean, we haven't talked about it for a while because it's not really been. I suppose it popped up in the news again recently with the whole 200,000 deaths in the winter or whatever. And again on our last edition, I was spinning out my negativity for the next however many years for it. But I just still get astounded by the fact that the people in these positions of power, I suppose I shouldn't be surprised. We already accept that these people are morons. They are not more intelligent for being there. They're not more skilled. They're not more expert when they're in these positions of power.
Yeah, I'm
and
not
they're
sure.
The ones.
I think some are morons. Some are just power hungry.
Oh yes, well I think they've all got to be power hungry to a greater or lesser degree, to some extent.
Yes, in those positions. They're all, there's quite a high bar of power hungriness, but they're not all Diane Abbott.
No. But
And I'm not sure what's worse. I'm not sure what's worse, having someone like Diane Abbott in power, or someone like, I don't know, Ed Miliband, who would,
right. So this is back to the game we played with Dan, isn't it? Was dangerous or?
I mean, they're both
stupid.
dangerous, but who's more dangerous? The dummy who's in charge, or the highly intelligent, high functioning sociopath?
We've clearly had them, but
it's difficult because I mean, Diane Abbott. Imagine her as Home Secretary. Imagine the state of.
Right. Okay.
What's worse?
Which one's Boris? Or describe Boris in your words.
So I know you and I disagree slightly on what makes someone intelligent.
Yeah.
But I would suggest that Boris is very intelligent. I think he's completely wrong, but I think he's clever. In almost all measurable tests, he would score very highly.
Yeah.
I know we could talk about things like emotional intelligence and all that kind of stuff as well. But I think in basically everything, he's a very clever chap.
having real world practical experience in things, for example.
I don't think that's necessarily intelligence.
No, I agree. I agree with you.
That's probably worth more, which is why lots of these politicians, they like school teachers, they've never lived in the real world.
Yes.
And they've got no
Very
experience
few
of
of them
real
anyway.
life. Yeah, I mean, you could tell the good teachers, couldn't you, when you were growing up, were the ones who had proper jobs beforehand. They were just, it was like night and day.
Oh, totally. At senior school.
But yeah, particularly. But I remember even as a junior teacher having kind of teachers who were who I just liked, and you find out later on that he'd been such and such for years beforehand.
Yeah. Did you see? Go back to politicians. Did you see Steve Baker's tweet? Did that appear?
Oh, none of us saw this.
feed?
None of us saw this coming, or none of us predicted this.
No, we never thought it would be this bad.
Yeah. None of you, maybe.
And
It was like none of us thought it would be, wasn't it?
None of us could have possibly foreseen the impact on the economy, whatever. But this is a guy who is on, for want of a better term, the libertarian wing.
See, this is another reason why I'm kind of steering away from the word libertarian, because it's not an absolute, and therefore the term libertarian, like liberal, like all these terms, anything that isn't an absolute will move with the Overton window.
Yeah.
So the more status that people get and politicians get, the lower the bar is for becoming a libertarian. That's the only reason he's classed as a libertarian, is because everybody else is Stalin. So, he
in relative terms,
he talked about having something like 35% of GDP being in tax. Remember?
I do.
And
saw him. I was as close to you as I am as him, and
there's nothing libertarian about that at all.
No.
So he might be slightly more liberal than his Tory colleagues, but that's it. That does not a libertarian make.
Right. Hold that. Have you got anything more on modelling? Because I think we should keep this one focused on.
No, I can rant forever about politicians and how illiberal.
That's why I'm reining you in, because we should probably save that for another one. Anything more? Any other interesting facts? I mean, obviously there are other computer models out there that are not agent based in the same way, like climate models. Now, obviously they do have.
That's a whole nother podcast. If you want to talk about that, I think we should probably do that on another one.
But I just wanted to distinguish the difference between agents in terms of simulating people and behaviour, because what you've been talking about here is behaviour modelling.
Sure.
Which you can very really easily look back and see whether or not people did conform to the behaviours they thought they would. I mean, this should be a really easy one.
Well, that's what I mean.
Test.
That's what I mean. You should be testing the behaviours every week and saying, are people doing what I think they're doing?
Yeah. But climate models are different because they're not involving.
Okay, here's the thing. Okay, when are the agent-based models for climate change going to come in? When people say, right, okay, we ban cars, this is going to happen, and if we do that,
You're right.
5 years?
You're
do you think?
right.
Or,
You're
or
right.
sooner?
No, sooner. Absolutely sooner.
If we ban cars, if we ban petrol engines, if we ban diesel, if we do this,
you're right.
This is going to happen. And
behaviour modelling for climate is next.
That's my prediction.
Behaviour modelling for everything. In that way, here's a computer model. Here's me being more positive. Unless there's a backlash against models.
So could this model actually, and the fact that it's been rubbish and completely disproven, could that be a good thing? So could it have saved us from all this other based modelling in the future? Is that a
It's a horrible thing to have. Well, like as I say to people when there's something positive comes out of having been in this lockdown for me personally, is I then just feel very guilty about all the people that will have died as a result of the lockdown. And I'm gonna weigh this on a horrible statistic for you, okay? And that is that more children in Kent have commit suicide because they couldn't cope with the lockdown than died of COVID-19 in the entire country. So I don't think there are any silver linings to this, personally, because those are tragedies. It's just horrible, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's an actual stat now. We don't have the full stats for the whole country yet, but more children in Kent alone. It's horrible, and that one needs to be hung around the necks of people like Neil Ferguson with these models.
And anybody who's
tell me you didn't put the suicide stuff in your agent-based modelling.
Yeah, anybody who is pro lockdown and pro enforced quarantine, this is on you.
Yeah,
this is absolutely on you. We've been saying, I mean, you and I've been saying since the absolute beginning that if it was bad enough to need people going into quarantine, they'd go into quarantine anyway.
Yeah, totally.
If it was bad enough, people would do it voluntarily. There is absolutely no need to force this kind of thing.
Yeah,
that is shocking.
Agreed. Well, sorry to end it on a shocking statistic, but I think just to put it into context about how bad this model was, it got that so fundamentally wrong. Because one imagines, and they only had the total numbers, didn't they?
But they
didn't say the number of children. They never broke it down. I don't know whether the model ever did break it down into this many children, this many people aged up to 40, this many people in old age.
No, I don't think it's. I think it's sophisticated enough to determine or to suggest that some people are more infectious than others. But it's got it completely the wrong way. So it treats children as being highly infectious and adults being slightly less so.
Yeah. They're just wrong.
But they don't model on things like suicides or the economy or people getting depressed or dying of malnutrition,
undiagnosed cancers, or heart disease, and all the other things. Yeah. Well, it's depressing, but that's what it is. So I think we should leave it there. Thank you for listening and watching this edition of Sounding Board. We'll try and make the next one a little bit more entertaining maybe, but that's computer models for you. Please share, please rate, review, and we'll see you next time.